I think 6 people. Last time we were in person, I think 6 people came to the finance section of the meeting. So welcome to all of you. It's great to have everybody here. Through the miracles of Zoom, I'm actually doing this from Iowa. I will have a completely different perspective on our finances from Iowa, I'm quite sure. I would like to start this by acknowledging the very, very much appreciated and good work of the Finance Committee. Finance Committee includes Suzanne Bloom, Sue Clark, Mike Gutzler, and Jean Kern. And I'd like to give a special note of appreciation to Wendell Anderson, who is on this call. Wendell has just been a godsend to me. He checks my work. He gives me good ideas. He handles the investments in a very significant way. He's just been great. So Wendell, I see you. I thank you, and want to make sure that everybody knows how much he's contributing to the Synod. I'd like to start this evening by talking about the results from the fiscal year just ending, which is because, you know, we have a strange fiscal year, February 1 of 22 through January 1 of 23. So I'd like to just review that material briefly. Catherine will put the report up on the screen, but again, if you want to look at it separately, she has the links in the chat. There is a narrative that goes with it, which I'm going to frankly be using mostly. So I'd like to just review it, what it says in the narrative, and then give you a chance for any questions. Everybody knows that 2022 was a year of adjustments. We had to deal with post-pandemic world. We had to face the challenges of inflation and a troubled investment climate. And we had to understand that there were changes going on in our congregations. And that is certainly seen in terms of the amount of mission support that the Synod received during 2022. It was slightly less than the actual amount of 2021, and we did fall short of the budget by 4%. Nonetheless, congregations did give $1.34 million, and that's a significant testament of faith to the people of our Synod. Synod registration fees were significantly lower than we had hoped, reflecting the COVID-related concerns, and turmoil in the markets meant that we did lose. We had an unrealized loss in our investment strategy. The good news there, however, is that during 2022, the Finance Committee reviewed our cash management strategies. Cash up until then had pretty much been just put in checking accounts and savings accounts that were earning 0.025%, as you all know. We are now in a structured laddered CD investment strategy for our excess cash, and we expect to bring in about $30,000 in interest in 2023. So that will make a big difference, I think. Are there any questions about the income portion at this stage? The expenses, we provided our full budgeted support to all of the programs that support ministries within our Synod. Obviously, the biggest amount of ministry support went to the ELCA. We are under a special arrangement with the ELCA in which 35% of our funds go to support church-wide activities, and we kept that up during the year. In addition, we supported new and renewing missions to the tune of $57,000, stewardship for $31,000, and as you can see, the other ministries listed there. These are all important things that we need to do, and they are obviously approved by the Synod Assembly each year, and we feel that it's important to try to fulfill those obligations whenever we can. Campus and campus ministries were supported to the tune of $52,000. And as I said, you can see the results there. In addition to that, we of course had to run the Synod office and provide for our excellent staff. There were a number of staffing changes during the year, including the addition of the assistant to the bishop for generosity, And we added a second lay staff person in the sense of a Julie Jackson, who is supporting our candidacy and our candidacy efforts within the Synod. So there were some changes there, and they were reflected in the amended budget that was presented last year at the 2022 Synod Assembly. Now, one of the things that I find the most difficult, well, not difficult, one of the things I find that can be confusing for folks to understand is that the Synod has significant reserve funds. These are monies that were given to the Synod in prior years that are for specific purposes. So, for example, we, in the last couple of years, received $250,000 from a congregation that closed for support of youth ministry. These funds are set aside and they are designated funds, as I say, for specific purposes, and we should be spending them. And we are trying to spend them. And that's why every year it looks like we have a quote deficit in our budget, because we are spending from these designated funds for the purposes for which they were intended. So in 2022, we spent $160,000 more than we took in new income, but we intended to do that because that $160,000 was spent from the dedicated funds. I think that's an important thing that people understand, is that it may look like we have a deficit, and I say that in quotes, and in a purely traditional accounting viewpoint we do, but we need to spend those restricted funds, those designated funds. People gave them to us to spend for ministry. And so that's what we're trying to do. And we're making, I think, good progress in doing that. So what that meant is that we took $160,000 out of those reserve funds last year to support the ongoing and current activities of the Synod in 2022. Now, questions from folks about the 2022. And I don't know that I can see everybody, so I think there are few enough of us that you can just speak up. Really?
Well, Julie,
if I wait long enough, somebody will ask something.
sure, why not?
Yes.
Designated funds for things like youth ministry or whatever. Those actually go against the budgeted line item, right?
Yes, and that's why in 2024, I'm presenting the budget in a different way. I'm showing the use of the designated funds as income to offset the expenses that were for those specific purposes. The designated funds, that's a good point, Terry. The designated funds are to be spent for what they were given for. So youth ministry is the one I keep going to. We have some for campus ministry. We have some for new starts in congregations, et cetera, et cetera. So they are very clearly designated for specific things. We do have some quite extensive resources that are designated for, quote, congregational mission, which is a lovely broad category. And what that means is that the Synod Council has said is that what that means is that we will use those funds to support congregations who are either in trouble temporarily or are having an issue or are starting, as King of Kings did, I point to them because I see Lynn Miller here, starting a second site for their congregation. So we're very careful to spend the designated funds for the designated purposes. And as a practical matter, what that means is that most of the mission support we receive is going to run the Synod office on a day-to-day basis. Rick, I see your hand up.
I have a question, but it spans multiple fiscal years. Should I ask it now or hold it for later?
Sure, go ahead.
La Sagrada Familia is a program initiated by the Synod, and it's been going on for over a decade, and it was funded in the early years at $45,000 a year. The last 2 years, it's been funded at $40,000. In the meantime, inflation and other factors have increased the cost of this ministry, and the Synod contribution has not kept up with inflation. St. Luke has sent a formal letter last fall, and I know the bishop and our pastor have met on it recently, and one of the things we were surprised to find out is that the current Synod administration didn't realize it was a Synod program. They thought it was a St. Luke program. At any rate, we're in need of more funds. We've accumulated a considerable deficit, which St. Luke is no longer in a position to carry for the Synod. Would you care to comment?
Sure. There are funds in the 2024 budget for La Sagrada, and La Sagrada is a good example of where if a congregation comes forward with a specific proposal for a specific amount of money, the New and Renewing Mission Table and the Synod Council can at any time during the year grant additional funds for that purpose. So we do have money in the budget for that, and we do have money that's not specifically budgeted, but that can be used for that. I was not at that meeting with you guys and the Synod staff, but my suggestion to you would be to come forward to the Synod Council and the New and Renewing Mission Table and say, we need X number of dollars for, in addition to what you've already supplied or promised to us to go forward.
St. Luke has done this, but the bishop wanted to wait and meet with our pastoral leadership before taking it to the Synod Council. Unfortunately, the letter went in last fall, and with the bishop on sabbatical and other things that have happened since, it took a long time to schedule a meeting to discuss it. And when they did have the meeting, that's when the folks at St. Luke, I didn't attend the meetings, I was not invited, found out that the Synod didn't realize that this was a Synod program, and St. Luke was only to helping administer it. So the request, while St. Luke can make the request, it's not for a St. Luke program, it's for a Synod program.
I understand. Kelsey?
I'm not sure. When we get to the new budget, I suppose you can tell me how much is budgeted for La Sagrada. But as I said before, the amount the Synod has been providing has had less and less purchasing power during the years because of inflation. It's particularly so during the past 2 fiscal years where the inflation factor has been higher than in previous years.
Absolutely. And we know that all congregations are dealing with that. So, once again, I think this is it is a bigger issue. There has been a significant investment by the Synod in La Sagrada Familia over the years, as there should be, So the question is, how much more is needed and how much more will be going on for future years? I mean, it's a tough issue. So I know that if the bishop and the staff are working with St. Luke and La Sagrada to come forward with an additional proposal for additional funds, that the Synod Council will certainly consider that. And as I say, we do have additional resources available. On the other hand, we have to balance out what we're spending, and we can't spend everything in 1 year. And I know you know that. So I think it would help everybody if there was a specific proposal from St. Luke and La Sagrada together to say, this is what we think it's going to cost to run the mission. And this is what, you've already you promised us, and we need to go forward with that. Kelsey, can I take
The
your
letter
question?
last fall included all that, and I guess we're waiting for the bishop to release that letter to the Synod Council. And again, it's taking quite a while for that process to occur. It's two things really, Julie, and the special funds can be used to eradicate the backlog of debt that we created, but the budget needs to be more realistic and take into consideration that there is inflation. So because it hasn't, the Synod is contributing less and less to this ministry over the years.
Okay, I understand that, Rick. I understand that. Thank you. Kelsey?
Thank you.
Hi, yes, my questions actually has a couple parts to it. I was wondering if there is a list of those designated funds available that's broken down by category.
There is the short there. I have, when I became treasurer, I spent 2 years trying to put together a booklet of what those funds are and what their purpose are and where they came from, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But if you look at the 2022 treasurer's report, page 3 of that, that doesn't give it. Never mind, it doesn't.
Okay.
I will get it's all summarized. There is such a list. It appears on the balance sheet, and I can certainly make that available. I will post it wherever it's the appropriate place to post it.
Okay.
But it's quite a long list, and some of them are our companion synods,
Okay.
et cetera. So but I will certainly do that. Thank you.
You don't by any chance know what the designated funds for youth ministry are off the top of your head, do you?
It's over $250,000 because
Okay.
of the gift that we got from the congregation that closed.
Okay. And then I have an additional follow-up question. So just to make sure that I'm reading these documents correctly, in 2022, the budget for youth ministry, the budget line item 6445 was $25,000. We spent $29,000. And in the new spending plan for 2024, youth ministry 6445 is only $15,000. Is that correct?
And that's because the youth ministry person on staff was moved out of that line and put down in as part of the staff line.
Okay, that's helpful. I also just want to shout out that we do have a youth on the call. Abraham, I see you. Thanks for being on the call. That's all I had. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions about 2022? And if not, we can go to 2024. I have to tell you, it drives me crazy that we skip a year. We're not far enough in on 2023 to have anything really that's meaningful to tell you. So it's certainly difficult to create a budget that is basically 18 months away by the time that that is, 8, 9, or 10 months away before we actually do it. 2024 is indeed a little bit challenging for all of the reasons that we've already discussed. As I've said, the good news is that we hope that our interest income will increase significantly because of the new investment strategy with the laddered CDs. There are not major changes in the budget for 2024. We're trying to keep the same categories, and we're trying to show that we are continuing to support the ministries within the Synod that we have supported in the past. We are budgeting $1.35 million for income based on what we actually received in 2022. 2022 was higher than 2021, but 2021 and 2020 were significantly lower than in prior years for reasons that we all understand. So it's always a guessing game to see what we're going to do. And actually, let me add one more thing about that. A budget is a plan. There are rules in our Constitution about making significant changes to the budget. We can't do huge things without going back to the Synod Assembly, which is what we did last year. But a budget is a plan, and if we don't get the money that we expect, we're not going to necessarily be able to spend all the money that we wanted to. But we are trying to predict as well as we can what we're doing with regard to that. The Synod Assembly, I will just note, for those of you who might not have heard, is a one-day assembly this year, we all know. It's also going to be a one-day assembly next year. We got out of kilter with the one-day, two-day thing. And for 2025, we must have a two-day assembly because that's a bishop election year. So we are going to have two years in a row where we have a one-day assembly, and that is reflected in this budget. What I did try to do here is to show up in income in account 41,200, the fact that we are going to be using some of the dedicated funds, the $175,000 in dedicated funds. This way it's clear at the very beginning and it shows up front. We accounting geeks know that it's not new income, it's use of existing funds, but I think it's important to show, and I'm trying, if anybody has a better way that I can show this, I'm certainly would welcome that. Other than that, we are continuing our support of the camps. We are continuing our support of student financial aid, et cetera, down through the lines. And what we're coming up with is a quote unquote balanced budget for 2024. We have, as many of you know, moved the Synod office several years ago, well, not several years ago, a couple of years ago now, to St. Paul's, who is graciously giving us a wonderful rate on the space that we have for the Synod office now. And that is a savings that has been used to support that money has been able to be transferred into other ministry funds. So we are doing our best to have as efficient an operation within the Synod office as we can.
Julie, question. This is Betty Landis.
Yes.
I guess I thought I had seen La Sagrada Familia on the budget or the spending plan in years past. I don't see the line item for
it's again, I condensed to try to make things not quite so detailed. Probably maybe I shouldn't have, but it's in the new and renewing mission line. It's part of that $70,000.
Thank you.
What I will do is I will put in the on the Synod website for the assembly page, I will put a list of what those dedicated funds are, add that to the treasurer's report so that you guys can see that in the before next week.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah. Some of them are very specific. For example, we have an endowment. The Synod has a true endowment with a corpus of about $750,000. This is from when Faith Church closed many years ago. And that endowment spins off income, and a percentage of that income is dedicated each year. Part of it is dedicated to, you will not be surprised, congregational mission, new and renewing mission. And the other part is dedicated to support of seminary students. So our candidacy committee is able to draw from that dedicated fund plus the seminary student financial aid that's put every year in the annual budget for the Synod. So that's a good example of combining the dedicated funds with the budgeted funds for each year. Yeah, thank you, Catherine. The $250,000 came from Messiah, the closing of Messiah. And it is a broad definition of youth. It's like babies through college. Some of us would think that you could be 45 and still be youth, but nonetheless. So there is, I mean, one of the tricky things when you're trying to think about how to use your reserve monies. I mean, I have to say, when I became treasurer, I was surprised how much money the Synod had in these reserve funds. So I have been telling people for years that we have money and let's figure out good ways to spend it. But of course, you don't want to take, your entire reserve fund and spend it all in a year, which we couldn't do. The budget for 2024 presumes spending about 10% of what we have in reserves. So if we were to spend 10% every year, we would be out of money in 10 years, unless of course they were, funded with new contributions. So it's a balancing act to know what you should do. I will always think that it's important to spend the money that people give you for the things that they give you the money for. But on the other hand, you do want to have some sort of a rainy day fund and some cushion just in case. I don't see any other hands up. Are there any other
I see Rick's
comments?
hand up right now. So Rick, do you have a question?
Oh, Rick, I'm sorry.
I have a question or comment, and that is, I assume that the dedicated funds are invested until they are spent. So even if you're spending 10%, they won't dry up in 10 years because they're invested.
Well, yes, that's true.
You mentioned that some of the investments are in laddered CDs. Is that the full extent of the Synod's investments, or are there other mechanisms where funds are invested?
The faith funds are invested with Thrivent, and we have another large hunk of money invested with the ELCA pooled trust. Wendell, do you want to comment on anything more about the investments? Wendell is kindly taking a lead on keeping track of those.
No, I think you summarized it very well, Julie.
Okay, Lynn.
Yes, on behalf of King of Kings, certainly want to thank the Synod for its continued support of our mission in Loudoun County to be an extension of God's work, our hands, and love and grace in this new mission field there. But I did have a question when you mentioned about the rainy day fund. I know, like, for our congregation, we have some intention around how many months of operating expense we want to kind of keep as a rainy day fund. Do we have any sense of what the Synod, do we say like 3 months, 6 months, just to, like you do in your own household, that, are you feeling pretty good about that you have access to that?
Yeah, I don't believe we have a formal policy on the rainy day fund. I can tell you from my experience in 40 years of nonprofit accounting that the minimum that is recommended is 3 months of operating expenses. And, there is no maximum, but, I would say 6 months is a better rule to have at least that much. And frankly, a year, given the past events of COVID and everything else, would be even better. Now, that depends on what you define as operating expenses. If you take only, for example, Synod operations, the staff and the costs for the website and whatever, that's $900,000 a year. It's if you take, a third of that, that would be about $300,000 in what would be considered a rainy day fund. One of the issues with these dedicated funds is that when the fund is dedicated to congregational mission, is the Synod a congregation who, if they absolutely had to, would be able to draw on those funds to keep operating the synod. I'm going to post this list that I have and all of the information that I found about these various funds so that you guys can see what's there. We're not anywhere close to having to reach that decision. But as a general rule, I would say that a 6-month operating fund, and if you take our entire budget, 6 months would be, $800,000, is not unreasonable. But there are certainly lots and lots of organizations that operate with a lot less than that. And I imagine most of the congregations in our synod don't have 6 months operating money sitting aside in an investment account somewhere.
Julie?
Yes.
Yeah, if you look at your report, you'll see that we actually have $500,000 in unrestricted funds.
Right.
That-
And that would be what would be considered the rainy day fund. Actually, that's not it, Catherine. It's down at the bottom under equity.
Um,
Unrestricted net assets. That would be what we would have as our rainy day fund. Christian?
Yeah, so I had a quick question. On the designated funds, you said that for the youth ministry piece, that was for, children through 12th grade.
Through college.
Through college. Is there any line item or funds that are set aside for young adult ministry? So for those that are young professionals into what the ELCA deems 35.
Yeah, that's a good question. There is not a specific line item set aside for that, but that would be a good, if somebody had a proposal on how to support young professionals, whatever, young adults. I know that the Synod Council would be delighted to hear that and would find that could be, considered, a congregational outreach. And we do have funds for outreach.
Okay, so those would be two separate pieces there. So,
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I'm gonna let you all go to dinner if nobody has any more questions. I hope to see many of you, all of you, perhaps next week at the Synod Assembly. Please know that I am always available. Hamre at metrodcelca.org. I can't even say it. But my email address is available, and I am always happy to answer questions, to give you more detail, to dig up some history on what may have happened in the past, et cetera, et cetera. So never hesitate to email me, but not before next week because I'm in Iowa on vacation. So I will not be responding to emails for the next few days, but I'm always happy to it's nice. I'm just can't tell you how thrilled I am that 25 people showed up for this. This is just great. So thank you all. And if there are no more questions, I'll let you all go to dinner.
Really, just thank you for your work.